One thing that I kind of see constantly are that people sometimes, when it comes to the internet, make the same mistake over and over. And I see that with the Nintendo Switch 2. And the most important factor with the Nintendo Switch 2 needs to be discussed because it's the most important factor that's been relevant now for decades at this point. And I'm old school, guys. I've been playing games since the NES era. I remember the old school NES commercials. I remember the issues with the crash and what happened back in the 80s. I remember the resurgence in popularity that the NES and the Sega Genesis that brought to the Americas and brought to just the worldwide. I remember the revolution that was the PlayStation 1. And throughout the whole entirety of me playing games, which is spanning decades now at this point, there's been one consistent thing that's always driven things forward, and that's the content. That is the content, that are the games, that's how much fun you have while you're playing. And sometimes there's people online through whether it's nefarious means or it's just maybe they just don't know. They don't understand what's the most important thing when it comes to gaming. I think that's why we're seeing so many of these different games like Split Fiction come out or Expedition 33 and have huge success despite not having the biggest budgets or having the most people working on them. It's the passion and it's the content that drives people to really play and enjoy games. And when it comes to Nintendo, there's no other company, especially with the Nintendo Switch 2, there's no other company where that's more relevant and more important because they still have the most relevant and biggest franchises in the industry right now from a sheer numbers sense overall, like the amount of franchises that are still relevant for decades now at this point. And it needs to be said, that's the most important thing, and people are underestimating that. And it happens almost every single generation. I've been covering Nintendo now for a decade plus, decade and a half now at this point. I've been covering gaming for a decade and a half overall, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, PC sometimes, and all of that. And people seem to forget this so much, and I don't understand why. Now, it's not pointing to the thing that happened recently. There was this huge leak and oh my gosh, and motherboard teardown for the Nintendo Switch 2 and it's a PS4 Plus or it's a little bit better than PS4. Well, no, it's actually better than PS4 in handheld mode, and then it's actually 2 times that when you dock it, so it's way better, but it's underneath Xbox Series S and it's this and it's that, and it doesn't really matter. Like, sure, you got to get certain power or the specs and all of that, but we already know what it is. We've seen the games. We've seen the games overall. We still need to test everything in terms of like the frame rates and stuff like that once they come out, but we've seen the games, we've seen the content, and at the end of the day, millions of people pre-ordered the system not because of a teardown or not because of benchmarks or anything, but because they want to play the awesome first party games. That is so important, and I'm seeing more and more people kind of brush that aside. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of you guys and people online that are saying and echoing exactly what I'm echoing because that is the truth, that is the facts. You can go all the way back to the NES era, all the way through. Nintendo, whenever they've had success, it's always been because they've thrown so many games at a system and it can be underpowered to heck and back, and it doesn't really matter. Look at the Game Boy. Heck, they were selling Game Boys in the mid to late 90s overall. That was a 4-bit system. I mean, yes, the Game Boy Color came out, made it more powerful, but that was still way more underpowered compared to what we saw from the consoles and even other handhelds that were trying to come out and compete. And that did incredible because of Pokemon and more games. Look at the GBA, same thing. 80 million plus sold in about 4 to 5 years. Crazy amount of sales. Then you look at the Nintendo DS, one of the best selling systems of all time, and the Nintendo 3DS, despite not selling as much, still sold a respectable 75 million units plus overall, despite not having really any major third-party support. They all dropped that system almost instantly, and there was just little things here and there. So it doesn't matter if Nintendo has had some failures in the past when it comes to home consoles or stuff like that. In every single generation that they've been in, they've had a successful piece of hardware that has a ton of content on it, which made it successful. Now they actually don't have to worry about having those 2 different consoles. They can just have one console, one device that does both. When you dock the Nintendo Switch 2, you get more power. When you play it in handheld, less powerful, but still very good in its own right. And it's spec'd up to the point to where it's going to be able to play modern games and it's going to look good enough and it's going to play Nintendo's first-party games incredibly well, better than Nintendo's probably had it in a long time, probably since the GameCube era. That was the last time when we said, okay, here we go with the first party, and there wasn't really any problems overall. It really felt like, okay, this is that power bump, that boost that makes these games look so much better outside of just art style wise when it comes to frame rate and everything else. So if you're looking at some of this stuff that happened, right, the motherboard teardown, great, awesome. We see some of the power stuff. We still need to wait because it's custom and you can't really test everything because they don't have the full system together with everything, and they're really just comparing it speculation wise against like laptop GPUs or against other stuff like that. So we still have to wait to actually get the system itself, DLSS and other things being factored in. But at the end of the day, man, the games are so important. That is the most important thing. But what's also most important is making sure those that are not subscribed, making sure that you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Hit that like button and click that notification bell because I got a bunch of awesome content and a really cool giveaway and surprise that we're going to be doing. I'm going to be announcing it very soon here. So I wanted to make sure I locked that down. But yeah, we're going to have an awesome giveaway coming up. So you're going to want to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop a comment below about what your favorite aspect about the Nintendo Switch 2 is so far. All right. So another thing that I saw on Twitter the other day, and I want to make sure that I address this a bit better. Some people didn't like how I talked about it on my live stream recently, but that's okay. It's no big deal. And it was talking about, there was an article from IGN, which I think it might have been like a paid article from like ROG Ally or something like that, because there's too many issues with the journalistic quality from someone who actually has a bachelor's degree in journalism from what I read. But it's not a knock on the writer, it's not a knock on IGN or anything like that. But yeah, they talked about how the Nintendo Switch 2 has to face a problem the original didn't, handheld gaming PCs. And I actually have no problem with people that want to play a handheld gaming PC. That's completely fine. If you like that more than Nintendo Switch or Switch 2, that's also fine. If you think they're the greatest things in the world, that's also fine. If you're selling your Switch for a ROG Ally, or ROG Ally X, or the Xbox new ROG Ally 2, or whatever the heck is coming out, I have no problem with that. Play, it's your money, it's your time, it's your life. Like I said before on my streams, unless I claim you on my taxes, I'm not really too worried about what you're spending, what you're selling or buying. That's just really weirdo behavior if you are worried about other people that you don't know and you're not managing their finances, or you don't pay for their things or pay for the roof over their head or what they eat. So it doesn't really matter to me at all. But what we're seeing from some of this type of stuff is that we're seeing some people not understand what actually makes the appeal of these systems in the first place. Now listen, PC handhelds are fantastic for what you want to use it for, but the reality and the truth of it is that there's only been, estimates wise, when it comes down to sales, about 6 million total or so, with about 3.7 to 4 million or so of those being the Steam Deck, and about 2 million or so being all the other handheld PCs combined. And that's after years down on the market, 3-4 years on the market. So there really isn't much of a market. And the reason why there isn't much of a market is, one, because of the price of these things, two, probably because of ease of use overall, because they are a little bit more difficult than like a system like the Nintendo Switch or a dedicated like PlayStation Vita or a PSP or something like that back in the day. But probably the biggest thing is because there's not built specifically individual games for this. It's just an extension of your PC. So if somebody already has like a gaming laptop, for example, or just likes to play on their PC or likes to play Nintendo Switch or something, they're probably not going to be into this as much. And I think that's the reason why you're not seeing an explosion in terms of sales overall for these devices. And the prices are just going up overall when it comes down to the components and what they're doing. But they're still good though. If you like portable PCs, it's fine. But I think that's the biggest reason why you don't see them blow up more, because they don't have games specifically built from these companies for it. They don't have those type of exclusives. You just have whatever's on your PC, and compatibility and certain issues that arise when trying to play certain PCs on a different device. It can definitely be a bit frustrating for some, and a bit, I would say, more complex than some would like to deal with. So I think that's the reason why the Nintendo Switch 2 kind of comes in and has this crazy amount of pre-orders, has this crazy amount of hype behind it. People are excited because of the first party games, because of the Nintendo Directs, because of the things that are done to facilitate that. Now, once again, no knock on PC handhelds. They're going to do their thing. They're going to be around. I mean, they're not going to necessarily sell huge numbers or anything like that, and that's okay. It's a whole separate market. I just found it interesting that there was an IGN article that would actually bring it up as if it's some type of huge problem for Nintendo Switch 2 when there's only been 6 million sold overall. That's fine for that market, but that's not really much of a problem for a mass market device. So I don't really see it as a problem at all, considering the Nintendo Switch 1 still outsells all of these PC handhelds pretty handily overall, just the Switch 1 at this point. So the Nintendo Switch 2 probably isn't going to have any problem, especially with, once again, the prices of some of these newer devices like the ROG Ally X, $700. You can get some for cheaper, but it's one of those things to where the prices and the ease of use not being all the way, as I would say, seamless as like a Nintendo Switch 2 or a Nintendo Switch are going to cause problems for mass market. And that's the reason why there's only been around 6 million sold all combined PC handhelds and only about 4 million or so Steam Decks, which once again, in that separate market, it's not the same. That's okay. But when you're trying to compare it to Nintendo Switch 2, there really just is no comparison. And in that article, they don't really give too much, I would say, credit or in terms of the ability to sell a system based off of first-party games. They just complained about the prices of the first-party games. But people are going to be willing to pay those prices, just like they're willing to pay $70 to play Monster Hunter Wilds on the PC. But people are going to be willing to pay the prices to play high-quality games on the Nintendo Switch 2, just like they're willing to pay for the PlayStation 5, play some of the high-quality exclusives on there as well. So it's one of those things to where, yes, you never like to see prices go up and everything, but people are definitely going to buy what they want to buy at the end of the day. And they've been showing that they've been doing that overall. But those exclusives are really what drives the platform. That's what makes it unique. That's what makes it sell. And without the big exclusives, you're not going to get a lot of huge sales in different things, which once again, no knock on the handheld PCs, but that's kind of what's happening there. There's not really anything exciting in terms of it to get people to go out there to spend $600, $700, $800 and all that on these handheld PCs. Whereas with the Nintendo Switch 2, you're going to get that excitement with the big first-party exclusives, and people don't want to have to tinker and emulate and do all that. Most people, some people, sure, they will. They'll figure out a way or whatever. But most people don't actually want to do that. And that's why you're going to see, once again, the explosion of the sales with the Nintendo Switch 2 pre-orders, and you're going to see consistent first-party games flow out from Nintendo, and that's what's going to help sustain the sales. Now, I don't think it's going to sell as much as the Nintendo Switch 1, although I do think that Nintendo is going to extend the life of this system for a long time. So like a Nintendo Switch 2 OLED model Pro version or something like that. So I think that's going to happen, and I think that's one of the most, if not the most important thing going forward, once again, is the content combined with the strategy of how you extend and how you get the games done and what you put out on the system and what contracts you sign with other developers and the sales of the system. So this is something that people also don't like to talk about or don't like to bring up, and maybe because they think that you're shilling, that you're being a fanboy or something. But to me, no, it's not any of that, because what's important is making sure that the health of the system is there. We've seen before in the past with Nintendo systems, like if you don't have a healthy install base, you don't have healthy games coming over. Like, look at the Wii U. The Wii U sold terrible. Developers just said, we're not going to try. We're not going to put out games on there. Nobody's buying anything. Third-party games aren't selling. So then they just abandoned it overall. I mean, look at what happened with the Nintendo 3DS. Like, a lot of developers just abandoned the system when it struggled out of the gate and never came back to it. Now, some did, but a lot didn't. So having a strong start and sustaining the momentum for sales and having those sales is very important, because it helps us get more games. They weren't there at the beginning, but they saw the momentum and saw that it was going to be supported with new big first-party games that would help increase the install base to get more third-party games to come over. The most important thing, though, were those first-party games. That's what people buy the system for. Then the third-party games kind of come in as like the bench players. Think of it as like a basketball game. You have your starters, right? You have Michael Jordan, the Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen. You know, you have your guys, Ron Harper, Dennis Rodman, Luke Longley. You got your starting five, but then you have the guys that come off the bench, you know, that come and help out, that can shoot the threes, like Steve Kerr, or that can come in like Tony Kukoc, 6th man of the year, right? You have these guys that can kind of come in that are really good players. The Nintendo Switch 2 first-party games are the starters. That's what's going to be to help drive the momentum and everything. Then the bench players kind of come in and facilitate that. So I think that's what's going to happen with the Nintendo Switch 2. We already see a lot of strong first-party support, which is awesome. Like, you want to see that. The system's coming out in June. They pretty much have a first-party game for every single month, whether it's a Nintendo Switch 2 edition or it's a brand new title. And there's going to be third-party games laid out. So that's the game plan for Nintendo. You have Not everything when it comes to third party, obviously, but you have very strong first party support. And then you also have some key third party games kind of coming in. And that's just the most important thing. It comes down to the content. You could talk about teardowns and motherboards and T flops and G flops and T239s and T57s and whatever, Blue 42s, hike, and all sorts of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's really going to be about the content, the first party games and the third party games that facilitate people being excited about the platform. Yes, power is important. It's part of the equation. It's a factor, but it's been there, done that. We know nothing's changing. So now it really goes over to what's going to drive the system going forward. So I think we're going to see that, just like we saw that with the Nintendo Switch 1. So we'll see what happens there. But what are your thoughts overall, guys, when it comes to everything we talked about here with the most important factor with the Nintendo Switch 2 and people potentially underestimating some of this stuff that I talked about here? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.